Hey YouTube, I'm Ali, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be reviewing Chronicles, but not just any old Chronicles. No, today we're going to be looking at the Chronicles of Crime. I think the best way of describing Chronicles of Crime is to say that it's a whodunit, play your own adventure meets interactive app meets board game. There we go. That's how I would describe it. Because, you see, Chronicles of Crime isn't just a single-play board game. It's a mechanism that allows you, or allows developers, to create multiple scenarios. Those are the things you play. You might decide to play a scenario about hunting down a serial killer one week, and next time you play, you might choose a scenario about finding a missing girl, for example, or a fashion model or something. The mechanism or the mechanics of the game allow the developers to create multiple scenarios, still with the same components. Now, that said, these components have locations, and the locations are all based in London. If you wanted a story that's based in America somewhere, for example, as I believe some developers have done so, you could release separate components that will enable that. They would just bolt onto what you've got here. And in fact, like I said, that's been done. But I digress. The aim of this game, then, in all circumstances, is to solve the case before the time runs out. Now, a case, like I said, could be one of an infinite number of things, though most likely it's going to be a murder, a number of murders, or a missing person. But it could be anything. The way the game plays out is you're going to have an interactive app. I'm going to do a shot of the app here somewhere. Here, this is the app. Now, the app allows you to choose a scenario, and then as you play the game, you're going to be scanning in QR codes. Now, each of the components, in fact, every single card and location in the game, the board game that you get, will have a little QR code. Now, this QR code is reused in each scenario in a different way. So you might decide, for example, the character I've just held up here is the lead detective in scenario 1. Another developer for another scenario might decide that this person is the victim. We'll come on to exactly what you get in the box in a little while, but the purpose, like I said, is to solve for the case before the time runs out. You can use that interactive app to help you determine what responses you get from everyone you decide is worthy of visit, or every piece of evidence you decide to gather. One of the other things that this app allows you to do also, which I think is really, really nice and adds a little extra something to the board game experience, is that occasionally you're going to get images pop up and you'll be given a certain amount of time to determine all the evidence you think you can see from that image. So a good example is you turn up to the crime scene for the first time, and rather than just the app showing you some text, you are instead going to see an image. Incidentally, this image actually is stereoscopic. It means you can put on 3D glasses and actually look at the image in 3D, which is rather nice. You can actually then, beyond that, pan around the image by literally just moving your phone or iPad or whatever it is you're using, your tablet. And as you pan around, the room will change. So it's like a 360 video in effect. But the great thing is you're going to call out the things you see, and they may or may not be relevant. Each of those things you call out will have a corresponding card in the game that you can then scan because it has a QR code, and it will tell you whether you've just wasted your time and ticked away the possibility of finishing the game in time, or whether you found a key piece of evidence which will lead you to a new person or a new location. Now, normally I would do what's in the box after my description, but because this is such a different kind of board game, I thought it would be beneficial to show you what's in the box first and then describe the game to you. So the box itself, now I backed the box, I backed the game on Kickstarter, and I received this sleeve with the box, which I'm not sure you get with a normal game when you purchase it retail. Anyway, the box itself, this is the lid. It's a standard size box, not too heavy. The one thing I don't like about it instantly is that it has an inset. The good thing about the inset, though, is that although insets allow you to put things in order, very often the cards will fall out in transport. This has a little removable clear plastic retainer that holds the cards locked in place. That I do like. Does it work? More or less. But I've taken everything out of the box. Let's just quickly talk about what you get in the box. You get a board. which is good for a board game. The board is single-sided. On the back, you have Chronicles of Crime, a little bit of artwork, which is nice. It's not just black. It's a foldable board. Oops. Foldable board, which I'm going to hold up here. Key suspects will go down here. Evidence goes up here. Evidence plus key suspect plus locations. Locations are all attached to the board. They're extensions of the board, are all attached around the board. Something I don't like, as you probably may or may not know actually, if you're a fan of the channel, is that I don't really like boards that don't have spaces designated for individual cards. Like this is a designated space for a card. I like that. This just allows you to add something to the board. Don't like that, but that's by the by. There's the board. Now, the things you are adding, those extensions, they look like this. They're all based in London in the base game. This one's Notting Hill, for example. Every single card in the game, as I said before, comes with a QR code because that's what the app uses to determine what's happening in this location. If you scan in a location that the app doesn't know about, the developer, if he's a good developer, would have written a response. So he might say something like, well, you just wasted 2 hours traveling to Paddington for no reason. Don't know why you did that, for example. Again, these are extensions to the board. They go around the board. You don't use all of them. There's an awful lot of them. I think there's probably something like 20 odd of them here. They're all labeled A, B, C, D, so the app will tell you which one to go pick out. They have spaces for suspects or persons of interest, I think they're called. Again, they don't really fit on the board. They fit just above. It's a bit annoying, but anyway, there you go. So a whole bunch of those. Oh, the cards themselves are very thin. Just bear that in mind. It's very thin cardboard, unfortunately, not thick stuff like the board itself. Now, what are you putting on there? You're putting on those locations, persons of interest. Now, here you get a full-size deck of I think it's something like 52 individual portraits. Each person here can be used in a scenario in a different way. So, for example, in your first scenario, this lady here may be the victim. In another scenario you play, she may well be the leading detective. Again, they all have a QR code and they have a number. There's an awful lot of them. What I particularly like is number 51, which I'm just going to find because it's a chimpanzee. The mind boggles. Now, what else do you get? You get smaller cards. I don't like small cards. Again, it's another pet hate of mine, but here we go. Small cards. These are suspect items and key evidence clues. Again, these are all objects or things that you may find that the app will show you. Now, these things here describe items, objects that you may be shown by the app. Now, when I say shown, one thing I'm going to do at the end of this is I'm going to show you the app itself, because although this is a board game review, it's a board game that heavily relies on that app. One of the real joys of this game is that when you come across certain scenes, like the murder scene, for example, rather than just describing words to you or throwing words up on the app will then take you into a 360 video picture, which you can literally either view with stereoscopic glasses. Again, in some cases they're supplied. Here are my glasses in a little bag. Again, I think that's because I backed it on Kickstarter. Little glasses that fit over my glasses. Anyway, they're rather neat. Don't need them to play the game, by the way. Or you can stick it into one of those sort of 3D viewer things that you know, 3D goggle things that you wear, where you have a phone and you put it in there. You know what I'm on about. Or you can not do any of that. Just hold the picture in front and either use your finger to pan around or to move the whole thing around and the image will pan. I'm saying a lot of words here to try to describe an event. That event is that you will end up looking in certain sections at images that may or may not have clues. So crime scene being a good example, you'll come across the crime scene, you'll look around the crime scene in a short amount of time, in a allotted amount of time before it fades, and you'll be calling out things that your colleagues will place down to be investigated later. Anyway, lots of cards, small size cards, find that a little bit disappointing. I like bigger cards, but I totally understand the amount of space this game could take up would increase. Now, finally, you also end up with some stock characters. These are stock characters in stock locations. So, for example, the scientists will always be at the forensic laboratory. It may well be that as part of your investigation, you decide, and you can decide this at any time you want, that you want to scan in Lu Chin, the scientist there, to go visit her and speak about this card. So the way that works is you'd use the app to scan that in and then scan that in, or one of the other way around maybe. But the point is, she would then tell you something about that person or not tell you something about that person, depending on the scenario. Finally, then, in the book, in the box, is the rule book. Now, the rule book's a big old A4 pamphlet, 4 pages long, not particularly thorough, but enough there for you to be able to play your first game. Like I said, this relies on an app, and it's the app that does the work of explaining how to play the game much better than the rule book, I thought. There we go. That's what's in the box. So Chronicles of Crime is a family board game, but I'm going to say that it's edging towards an adult-themed game more than it is a kids' game. I think you probably need to be about 12 plus. And this one's not to do with complexity. This is to do with the theme itself. It's murder, and most of the time it's murder, and you're solving murders. The scenario writers can be as creative and as graphic as they wish in the app. And in doing so, it means you can end up with some very disturbing, really, scenarios. So, a word of warning, this is probably better played as adults, in my view. Number of players is 1 to 4 according to the box. Now the reality is individuals here don't take turns to do things. You introduce the idea of turns. You're really solving a puzzle all together. It's kind of like doing a jigsaw. Each person's doing their bit. How many people do a jigsaw? Well, as many people as you can fit around the table. We have definitely played this with 8 plus people, and I don't think it makes a huge difference. It's probably more enjoyable with a fewer number of people, though. I think it's kind of a good scenario to play on your own, or even with just one other person. In terms of time for play, well, again, it totally depends on the scenario. I think the quickest game we've played is about 40 minutes, and the longest was about 2 hours. I'll come on to the longer games right at the end of this, because there's something to say about that. But yeah, between 45 minutes and an hour, let's call it an hour for the sake of this. So is this a board game or a card game? Well, it is a board game, though it's a very different board game because it has this total reliance on an interactive app. So calling it a board game, but just bear in mind, it's a board game with a star against it. Now, in terms of simplicity of rules, the rules are actually very simple to understand. So very clearly described in the rules set, but even more so in the app. The app leads you through what you need to do. So I'm going to say pretty simple rules. In terms of complexity, well, now, the complexity totally depends on the scenario. You can have a really well written scenario where you've got to deduce a number of things, visit a number of locations, make connections, and then you can have the reverse. You can have a very black and white, simple scenario. In terms of this video, I think I'm going to give it an average value, but I'm going to put a star against that as well. It could be much simpler and it could be much more involved. So it could be lighter, it could be much more involved. But right now, I'm just going to call it average. As for the last 2 elements here, well, I'm going to say it's a cooperative game, but you're all playing as one giant team individually. Well, that's a bit complicated. All right, then, so mechanics. Mechanics. Well, let's start with, I'm going to say social deduction. Now, normally social deduction means rationally working out what your colleagues are doing, saying, or acting, and to determine whether, they're a traitor or not, usually. In this case, I'm saying social deduction because you're deducing whether or not your person that you're investigating is actually a murderer or not. So I'm going to say social deduction in the sense that you are trying to work out what the hell is going on. Now, off the back of that, I'm going to say that the second one is questing. Now, questing, again, normally means for me choosing to do tasks that will reward you on some way. Well, this whole thing is a quest. You're going off on little mini adventures, trying to determine the right location, find the right person to speak to. So there are little mini quests in there, which is why I'm putting questing as the second mechanism. Now, the third mechanism is something I'm just making up again, like everything else, in fact, which is app related. I'm just going to put an app icon here, which implies that it relies on an application to play, and the mechanics of the app make the game work. So those are my 3 mechanics. Okay, when it comes to mechanics and theme working together, yes, they do work together, but they work together because of the app. It's the app that brings everything to life, I think. The board game is just extra additional stuff to make the experience a little bit more cohesive, a little more involving of other people. But really, it's the app that has the brains. Now, that said, theme is everything in this game, and if the story writer, the developer of the scenario, hasn't done a very good job, then you're going to feel that. Conversely, if they've done a good job, and in some of the base games I think they have done a good job, then the theme really does come through, and you really do feel like you're in a whodunit. So yes, you do make meaningful decisions in this game, but it took me a long while to say that, because in reality this plays out just like a choose your own adventure game. In that scenario, you're going to be given 3 or 4 different options. You're going to choose one, and then you're going to follow the path it leads. The same can be said about Chronicles of Crime. You're in reality given a limited number of options, and you're going to follow one to its conclusion. For example, you might come across a person who says they think they're going to be the next victim, they've received threatening phone calls, they want you to return at 5 o'clock. Are you or are you not going to return at 5 o'clock? You probably are. And that's not really a meaningful decision you're making. Although you are given the choice not to, you probably are going to. So yeah, meaningful decisions, but... Okay, in terms of multiple pathways to win, this is totally dependent on the storyteller and the scenario writer. I think a good scenario writer should have multiple endings to their scenarios. Maybe you do find the perpetrator of the crime. Maybe you converse with him and convince him of his wrongdoing, and maybe he gives up a life of crime and invents a cure for cancer. Or maybe you shoot him between the eyes and he dies a horrible death, leaving a wife and a strange child. Just a strange child. There we go. The point is, it's down to the scenario writer. So there could potentially be multiple ways of winning the game here, multiple ways to solve it. Yeah, totally depends on the scenario. In terms of skill and luck, I would say this is very much a skill-based game. Yeah, you could be unlucky in not noticing a clue when it's shown to you, but really I'm going to say that's a skillful thing. It's down to you to recognize these things and then pursue them using your own logic and deduction. Will a new person have any benefits? Will a seasoned player have any benefits over a new guy? No, I don't think so. I think you're both going to go on the same adventure together. It's all down to your own perception and your own logic, I think, or the collective logic as to whether or not you're going to do well. The game, though, is very engaging, and again, that depends on the scenario writer. If it's a good, exciting story, you're going to be gripped. You're going to want to know what happens next, and you're going to want to solve it. If it's a dull, very obvious scenario, then perhaps not. Again, totally dependent on who writes the scenarios. The ones that come with the game itself, I thought, on the whole, they were quite captivating, they were quite promising, albeit a little short, but they were good. Now, when it comes to iconography and legible text, again, I'm a little unsure. The stock components you get in the board game make an adequate job for you to determine, but they're reliant on images and words that are used on the app. And in some cases, the images aren't very clear. So, for example, we arrived in one particular scenario where we looked at the crime scene and we saw hamburger wrappers lying around. So we called out our food. Turns out that wasn't food, it was trash. So, did we choose the wrong card, or was the picture not clear enough? There we go. That's what I thought of that. So, in conclusion then, is this a good game or not? I think it is a good game. I think it's a great game, but I'm going to separate 2 statements out here. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the game itself. The idea of Chronicles of Crime is amazing. I think it's very clever how all the components you need are there in the box. All you need to do is download a new scenario off the app. I think the app and this board game work very well together. I think you really do feel as if you're solving a crime together, which is great. That's exactly what it's achieving. Now, I'm going to talk about the scenarios that come with the base game. On the whole, I think you get 3 or 4 scenarios of varying sort of difficulty, again, downloadable on the app. I think on the whole, the scenarios were really good. They were engaging, I really enjoyed them, we solved them, fantastic fun was had by all. That said, there was one particular scenario where we thought we had done everything we needed to do and we didn't know where to go, and we basically got stuck. This was akin to playing a video game like Monkey Island, a point and click game where you can't quite work out how to solve the puzzle, and you end up having to go and cheat by looking on Google for a walkthrough. Same sort of thing happens in this game. You're going to come to points where you think, well, hang on, I've spoken to the victim's sister, I I've checked out the victim's apartment. I think I've looked at, spoken with the suspect. I don't know what to do next. That really did kill the vibe, or can kill the vibe of the gameplay. So you're in the middle of a game, you're all excited, and suddenly you don't know what to do, and it just starts becoming very apparent because people start losing interest. So bear that in mind. It again comes down to the scenario writer. It comes down to the person who's creating those scenarios that you're playing. It's their job to make sure that those situations don't happen and that you're funneled into the right kind of experience. But that said and done, I do like this game. It is a real firm favourite of the family, providing those scenarios are appropriate and exciting. Now, if you've enjoyed that, then please give me a thumbs up on the video. If you like what I do on this channel, which is reviews most weeks, plus a whole bunch of stuff at the moment on game design, because I'm really getting into that, then consider subscribing to the channel, because every subscription counts. For now though, and until next time guys, look after yourselves.